Today I'm going to try to draw this yellow church in Tallinn, Estonia. And if you're new here, the operative word is try. I'm going to try to draw. This whole thing is about the process of learning to draw. It's not how you might learn to draw. It's certainly not the best way to learn to draw, but it's my way of learning to draw. When I started this series, I figured the best way for me to progress would be to just do it every day. I have a thing for consistency. I think I do a lot better with small, continuous steps versus big, spread out strides. And I'd say that goes for most everything I attempt. Drawing is something I've dabbled with over the course of my life, but I never took it seriously enough to stay consistent and reach any meaningful level of proficiency. I treated it like this romanticized thing that I felt should have simply flowed out of me. But of course, that was naive. And it took doing something big like this to get me to finally sit down and just do the work. I've always wanted to be good at drawing, specifically drawing what I see, like what's physically in front of me in real life. And so I figured the best way for me to get there would be to do just that. Sounds reasonable, I know. I knew that the drawings would not be attractive for a long time, and that's putting it lightly. But I think that's the case for anything worth doing. It takes a little bit of trudging through the infantile, directionless drawings in this case to make it to the good ones. So that's what I'm doing. I've grabbed my humility, accepted my ignorance, and jumped all the way in. I think I've come a long way in the past 55 days. I'd urge you to go back in the catalog to see where I was just a few weeks ago. But I also recognize how short this journey has been in the grand scheme of things. I say it all the time, and if you stick around, you'll hear it a whole lot more. But I know I have a long way to go. And yet, candidly, that's what makes this whole thing so exciting. Having seen progress occur over a relatively short span of time, I'm eager to see what another 55 days will get me, not to mention another 5 years. So, if you're interested in seeing where I take this, please stick around. As you'll see today, this will, without a doubt, not be the best drawing of a church you've ever seen, but it is representative of one step of the journey so far. So take that as you will. And please subscribe. Anyway, let's get into the drawing. So as you can see, I've started off by plotting a lot of these little points and lightly drawing a bunch of exploratory lines. My primary concern here is with the proportion of the church, so I've been careful not to boldly stake my flag until I feel like things are reasonably accurate. Today, I'm following my own advice from a few videos back when I said I'd alter my approach to drawing towers more on a case-by-case basis. And if you missed that video, go check it out. It's number 52. Anyway, I've gotten used to drawing them from the top and working my way down, but I don't want to do that for this one. I'm interested here in the entire church that you can see, so all of it is important to me. Where I am at this point in the drawing, you might be thinking that actually today would have been a good day to stick with my typical approach, seeing how I don't have enough room at the top. But I actually wanted to include the whole church so badly that I didn't care about it fitting into this frame that I've drawn, at least not all of it. Which sounds contradictory to everything I just said, but bear with me, I'll explain. Usually, I want the top of the tower to fit neatly within the frame, and if I cut off the lower parts of the structure, so be it. I can deal with that. But, like I said, I'm prioritizing the entire church, so that wouldn't have worked. I knew there was a chance that I wouldn't leave enough room to accommodate something, seeing as I'm not very good at this. So I decided it wouldn't be a big deal if the top of the tower were to extend beyond the frame, whereas extending the bottom part below it, I don't know, that seems like it would have looked off somehow. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hopefully that's all making sense. I'm sure it will by the end. Anyway, so when I was planning how to approach this, I was having a tough time figuring out exactly how and where to begin. And what I realized is this: the top of the church, where the yellow ends, like before the pointy thing at the top, forgive me, I don't know what any of this is called, from that point down to the line just below the clock face is equal-ish to that same line down to the top of the entranceway. I really hope you can see that in the reference. So I have these two big rectangles that are about equal in height, which is pretty simple for me to visualize on the paper. Once I have those, I can just start adding things like piece by piece, measuring one thing against another. So yeah, I'm just building out this church bit by bit, planning for the top of the tower to extend up and out of the frame. And I actually think it ends up looking kind of cool. Maybe I'll even do it again. Who knows? I don't know. Do you know? I don't know. Also, I'm just now realizing that I actually ended up taking the same approach, like going from top to bottom anyway. I just, in this case, defined the top differently as the top of the yellow. So, whatever. You get the point. Oh, side note, this guy asked me to take his picture, and I don't think he liked the ones I took very much because he stood next to me afterward looking through them for way too long. He said he might as well get the professional to do it, which I don't know about you, but I don't see people with their phones on tripods and think professional, but whatever. Okay, while I continue my way down, I guess, so dumb, I want to talk to you about something that's been rolling around in my head for a few days. And it's this dichotomy of being a beginner and a perfectionist at once. And if you can't tell, yeah, this is going to be mega tangential, so strap in. So, on the most basic level, it's kind of just expectations versus reality. In my head, I want things to be nice and correct and representative of what I see, but my eye's ability to interpret it is lacking, or at least misaligned, and my hand doesn't yet have the dexterity, or maybe more accurately, the muscle memory to pull it off. When it comes to like complex, highly detailed stuff, I've come to expect that, but I'd say that this church is a good example of that mental clash that I'm talking about. Essentially, this reference is a lot of straight lines going this way and that way, and the delta between what my eye sees and what my brain tells my hand to draw is pretty narrow. Also, there's little interpretation to be done. So if what I draw is far off from the reference, it's confusing for me to know where, or more annoyingly, how it went wrong. Combine these two things, the straightforwardness and its concreteness, and you end up with a reference that seems beginner friendly, maybe even easy. However, I found that time and time again, these quote unquote easy references can be some of the most difficult to interpret. So the perfectionist in me, the one who wants all the lines to be straight and pristine, is confused as to why the beginner in me is so inept. I've mentioned this previously, but it's disorienting to honestly think that I can do better than what I can do. And I'll say that again. Right now, I think that I can do better than what I can do. I don't mean someday. I mean, when I look down at the paper, I'm watching myself draw, like assured that this must be someone else's hand, which obviously is insane. I know. So there's that. Additionally, the dichotomy puts me into this kind of eyes bigger than my stomach position, where I look for things to draw that don't align with what I can actually draw. So the perfectionist in me is setting up the beginner in me for failure. And getting around that is kind of awkward. Again, I think I can draw better than I can draw. So do I walk around and just aim low? Like, do I pick things that seem too easy? Probably not. But yeah, it's an odd feeling to say the least. And then as I keep drawing, the beginner is, getting a little better, which inspires the perfectionist to raise the bar even higher. On the one hand, I don't want the perfectionist to dictate every little thing about the process because it'll bum me out a little bit every time I make a drawing. But also, I don't want the beginner to take the reins because then that'll hinder the rate of my own progress. It's like I'm slowly speeding up, and one part of me can only go so fast, but the other is already trying to shift to the next gear. I'm either too easy on myself and I go too slow, or I'm too hard on myself and I risk bogging down. And finding that sweet spot is proving difficult. I guess thankfully, this is something I've dealt with a number of times in the past, primarily with music and photography, both of which I've mentioned in the past, but also in everyday things like maintaining friendships, exercise, cooking, you name it. This dichotomy is like a battle that's always happening in the background. And with drawing, it's more palpable than ever, probably due to the way I'm experiencing the whole process from drawing to editing these videos, but also because I kind of forewent drawing from photos and went straight to real life, which I'm aware is not special. It's just a different thing. All of my choices this time have put me in a position to feel this strange, disorienting feeling a lot more potently than usual. And yeah, there's nothing to be done about it, but I figured I'd mention it because it is part of this process for me, for better or for worse. Well, that was a lot. Let me know if any of that sounds familiar to you. I'd love to know if I'm normal or absolutely out of my mind. Tell me in the comments. All right, so let's see where we're at. I'd say that the silhouette of the church has materialized nicely, and I'm pretty happy with the direction things are headed. Certain proportions could be a lot better. The perfectionist in me is enraged, but all in all, it's looking like the church, so that's nice. I will say, I remember losing my place a few times over the course of this drawing, which made keeping track of certain lines pretty difficult, specifically regarding perspective. There was a lot of looking up and down, which generally is a good thing. But there were times when I'd almost treat a line that was meant to be the side of the church like the front. And I find that this happens a lot when I'm kind of struggling with what to do next and with where the drawing is headed. So today, there are some small details here that I wanted to include. So I wanted to make sure I was observing the reference as much as possible, but I was also aware of this nagging feeling that I was coming to the end and the drawing lacked something big, like something I couldn't put my finger on. Instead of stop and think, I just, keep moving through it, bouncing from one thing to the next, and I don't ever find the clarity that I'm looking for. Seeing the drawing now, I can spot two things that I did wrong that might have turned this drawing around had I resolved them. The first is the specific proportional difference between the left and right side. Thanks to this skewed perspective, there are areas on the right that are more hidden on the left, which I didn't really account for. I think you can probably see that in the reference. They're not perfectly even, but they're close enough to look like it in my drawing, so I lose a bit of that realistic perspective. Second, the shading. There is none. I've talked about this a few times already, that I'd like to hone my compositional skills before diving too deep into shading, and I stuck to that here. Aside from some darker spots, namely the door and some of the windows, I ignored the shading, but I think it was necessary here to at least make up for the perspective issues. Had I lightly shaded in the front of this church, leaving the right side bright, maybe it would have looked better. That said, I've been down this road before and have chosen to incompletely shade things to the drawing's ultimate detriment, which I chose to avoid here. Overall, it's fine. It's not the end of the world, but it's just another example of the beginner not living up to the perfectionist's expectations. On a positive note, I'm reasonably happy with my line work today. From far away, I could be convinced that I even drew parts of this with a ruler, which is exciting. Well, don't look too close. And I'd bet that comes from the plotting of points that I did in the beginning. Since I didn't go straight in with my lines, instead opting for these small dots, I was able to better visualize the full shape of what I was building. I wasn't nearly as wobbly as I've been in the past as well, which is strange considering just how long I was sitting here. You're watching the drawing portion of the video at about 1.5 times speed. And this thing is still around 15 minutes or more. By minute 10, my legs are both asleep, and I'm just trying not to collapse. So it's weird that the lines stayed so straight. Okay, what else? Gotta stay positive. Well, this will be funny if you've seen any of my other tower drawings, but I'm happy with the top portion. I actually think the windows look better than 99% of my other ones, so that's nice. And the tippy top part, the pointy thing with the cross on top, the spire, I guess, it ended up looking nice. It's detailed in a way that I appreciate, especially contrasted against the flat, kind of bare front of the rest of the church. And, well, that's all I can come up with for now. All right, great. So here's yet another church with a tower. And I don't hate it. But like I said, it's certainly lacking. Ironically enough, all that talk about prioritizing the entire church did not extend to the bottom right, I suppose. Not sure what I was thinking there. Just ran out of room, I guess. Yeah, so anyway, I think this has grown on me since I drew it. I recall not feeling great about it. So maybe another few hours and I'll really love it. What do you think? How does it compare to the other towers? Let me know. And if you're enjoying the series, consider subscribing to the channel. Anyway, I really appreciate you for taking the time to watch this one, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.